Topic of today's webinar is requirements gathering made easy with ChatGPT. Okay, and right off of the bat, that's a big lie. Um, requ requirements gathering is never easy, and I think we can help show you today how it can get done faster, a little easier, but it's hard work. It's still hard work. And this is part one. I love this topic, requirements gathering, and I'm going to set a little bit of context before turning it over to my colleague, Tim. So this is part one, and I'll talk about what we'll cover today. We have a webinar planned next month where we'll cover kind of the first half of the process, and that's looking good as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm Gordon Jones, the COO of Decisions. With me is my colleague, Tim Stahl, who's the Senior Director of our architecture team at Decisions. And fun fact is that both Tim and I were customers of Decisions prior to coming to work here. And I think it's safe to say we were both attracted by the same thing, the fact that we had something complex to build. We wanted to materialize it fast, and the Decisions platform is ideal for that. So that's really the Decisions, the fundamental value that we provide is that we enable people to build complex software quickly without necessarily requiring programmers. A few plugs. We actually just completed a Submerged training event in Dallas, which I think ended about an hour ago, or maybe right at 1 o'clock. So we had a 3-day event in Dallas. We have another one coming up next January, the 23rd through the 25th in Miami. Hey, there's no better way, no better place to learn all about Decisions than getting your hands in it for a few days. So the next training event is coming up in January, and all throughout next year, every other month, there'll be another training event. And you can find all about it on our website at decisions.com/events. Another couple things to plug. Later this month, we have a webinar on automating data insights with ChatGPT. So this one is looking really cool. We're going to take some of our data and show how you can automate the process of running some very complex data analysis through ChatGPT, but have Decisions orchestrate and automate it so that after you've got it all working the first time, you can just use the platform to run it over and over again. And then part two next month in requirements gathering made easy with ChatGPT. So that'll be Thursday, December 14th from 1 to 2 Eastern. And in case you missed it, you know, we've had a lot of webinars recently incorporating our ChatGPT module. These can all be found on our website. We have even this webinar, after we're finished, we're going to post it to our video channel. So decisions.com/videos. You can find any of our most recent webinars, including everything that we've done back just about to the history of time, or at least those on our most recent release. We've also got an AI white paper that I think you'll find very interesting. Talks about lessons learned with automating ChatGPT and providing governance. I think that's again the head value that Decisions provides in utilizing these large language models to automate your business processes. If you have questions at any point, you know, drop it in the chat, drop it in the Q&A, and we'll either answer on the fly or certainly at the end of the webinar today. So what's the agenda? I've just got a few quick slides for those new to the platform to give you a quick overview into what Decisions is and how Decisions adds value in this world of generative AI. Quick plug to our OpenAI module. which you can find inside the platform. And then again, I'll lay out a few slides to set some context, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tim to walk us through the live demo. All right. So what is Decisions? Decisions is a no-code business process automation platform. It is truly no code, so you don't need to know JavaScript. You don't need to learn a proprietary scripting language. It's drag, drop, click to configure. And what I would say is these are three typical use cases that we get involved in. The first is rules engine and decisioning. I think the rule engine is the core of our product. It's probably the thing that clients come to us most. And the whole idea here is that you can take your rules out of custom code, out of stored procedures, and put it in a place that can be easily understood by your subject matter experts. They can build rules, they can look at rules, they can modify rules, all using a graphical user interface that looks a lot like Excel. So some common use cases here, think medical claims processing, think insurance underwriting rules, think loan origination, both in mortgage and all kinds of alternative lending. These are all very strong use cases for decisions. Another common use case is to sit off to the side of these large transaction systems like Salesforce, like SAP, and leverage those to manage the things that are different. What I say is custom processes. You may have customer-specific processes where you don't want to customize your SAP system, for example, but you can manage all of those special processes off to the side using decisions. And taking that one step further is workflow and orchestration. So we typically on a common use case, we might tie into 14 different client systems. So this is kind of an example from maybe a front-end Marcom stack example where we're integrating with Salesforce, HubSpot, ChatGPT, as we'll show, ZoomInfo, as well as SAP and DocuSign, for example. This is quite common. So again, decisions, no-code software development platform. And when I turn it over to Tim, he'll give you a brief overview as well. But the best way to really understand how Decision works is to sign up for a demo. Just head to our website. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a free demo button. Click it, sign up, and you can talk to one of our engineers who will walk you through the whole process. Just a bit about generative AI. You know, I think you've all familiar with what's been happening and how fast things are moving. What we're going to show you today, and there's a number of opportunities where companies are deploying generative AI. Some of them are new business models. What we're going to show you here today is how to be more productive with the things that you're already doing. So that's really the value prop that you'll see out of this use case today. Some learnings. You know, we first launched our AI module back in May at our user conference, and I would say there's a number of things that we've learned since then. First and foremost is that oftentimes you need multiple calls back and forth to ChatGPT, and sometimes the answer that you get back is restructured and sent again. And the Decisions platform is ideally suited to doing all this. So once you've got a prompt that works, we house that, we manage the back and forth with the large language model, but more importantly, we provide governance and an audit trail. You know, what was sent, what was received, who sent it, when, validating. You can even put in rules to ensure that you're not sending out any personal information like social security numbers, and validating the data that gets back. So again, this is an important piece to what we do, And when you find yourself doing the old copy paste routine in ChatGPT and it's time to automate, that's where our platform really steps in. You can find our open AI module just next door to all of the other modules and decisions. We have dozens and dozens of these. You'll find it in the features section. You can click, download, install, just as you would any other module within decisions. Okay, just to set the table here about requirements gathering. Within decisions, we use an agile methodology, which I'll go through briefly here. And today, what we're really covering is this architecture process. It's scoping out a project. What is it that somebody's looking to build? And typically, when we do this, we spend 1 or 2 weeks doing an architecture exercise. Tim has a team of, I don't know, 10 or 12 folks now that specialize in this process of scoping, building out a requirements document, and then building out a requirements traceability matrix. And actually, what Tim's going to show you is taking the requirements doc and blowing out the requirements traceability matrix. In December, next month, we're going to cover a bit about basically automating the creation of the requirements document itself. Then after architecture, you go into the build process. 2-week sprints is typical for us, with a demo at the end, with all of the common agile ceremonies. So everything that you'll see fits well into an agile development methodology. This is what a typical project looks like within decisions. So there's some architecture up front, getting the general design of what needs to get built, followed by a series of sprints, at the end of which you might have 1 or 2 sprints to do end-to-end testing, followed by the go live. What we're covering today is a bit of this agile architecture process. And we typically do this through 2 means. One is either using our process mining tool, and you can learn all about that on our website. We have a lot of webinars that cover the process mining topic. Or we go through a storyboarding exercise. Typically takes a week or so to go through that storyboarding, and then another week to 2 weeks of taking that, building up the document, building out the RTM. This piece is where we're going to show you a lot of automation today to dramatically reduce how long that process takes. So it's taking that document and building out the requirements traceability matrix. So back to the storyboarding, this is where a facilitator tries to tease out what are the big activities that this application needs to do, what are the backbone activities needed to make that happen, and then all of the tasks that are needed to fulfill those backbone activities. And the interesting point that I'd like to make here is every time we go through this process, you ask everybody what they want in the application. Everybody throws it all in there. When you're done, what you have is a project that's 3 times the budget and twice the timeline of what you really wanted. And then it's always time to draw a line and figure out, all right, what's the MVP? What will be in the first release, and what will we cover in future releases? So happens every time.
Every time.
So a typical architecture exercise is a facilitation with one of our architects and the subject matter experts of our clients, interspersed with periods where the architect may go off and do some documentation work. This is only to point out that this is a very time-consuming process, typically around a whiteboard or around its Zoom equivalent. And it's a lot of teasing and talking about what this application needs to do. The output of that, once captured, is basically a Word document These can be sometimes 30 to 50 pages, but it's an explanation of each piece of the process, along with some flow charts, some diagrams, some wireframes to give the build team a general idea of how the whole thing is supposed to come together. And then we build what's called a requirements traceability matrix. So it's got high-level requirements, and you can think of this as 3 levels of one-to-many relationships. So one high-level requirement will have multiple backlog items or user stories, and each one of those user stories will have multiple tasks. So ultimately, these are the forms, dashboards, rules, flows, integrations, those things that need to get built. So what Tim's about to show you is the process from this requirements document to blow out these, as well as test cases and items to be built. In part 2, we're going to cover how you might go from a Zoom session with transcripts to automatically creating at least a version 1 of the requirements doc. So there's 2 parts to this. Today we're gonna cover the document to the RTM detail. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim. Take it away, Tim.
All right. So yeah, as Gordon was mentioning, for those of you who've not seen the platform before, this is the Decision Studio. This is the back end of the platform where a user would go to actually build their flows, their rules, their forms, etc. And that's what we're going to work out of today. And to the point before, what we're really trying to do is take that 1 to 2 week process of building out an RTM, right? In project management parlance, you may have heard it called a work breakdown structure, but it's really high level requirements, figuring out what user stories are needed to satisfy those requirements, as well as the acceptance criteria for those user requirements to be considered done. So as a user, I could look at this and go, I need to be able to enter data in a form and have it save. And the acceptance criteria would be, it shows the form, it has the fields on it, it validates my input, and when I click the button, it shows up in the database, just as an example. And as you can imagine, that can be pretty time consuming. That's a lot to write. And what we're trying to do through this is simplify that process in such a way that we can take a system that we've built within our platform, feed it that data from those business users, from those first week or so of storyboarding, from that initial requirements gathering, having it in real language that people can understand, feed that through our ChatGPT module and this RTM builder, and have it return, at least again, to Gordon's point, phase 1, right? Version 1 of the document. If it gets me 80% there, if it gets me 70% there, I'm still way ahead of where I was, at the beginning of the process, where I'm, manually typing all this out for a number of weeks. So what we have within our platform is just this very, it's a kind of a very basic bare bones application, but one that has a lot of power on the back end of it. And what I've got on my other screen here is we have worked with, in this case, a fictitious bank called the First National Bank of Savannah. They are looking to automate what is currently a manual loan origination process. So we've worked with the business users, we've assessed the situation, we've gotten the scope and the background, all of that's documented in a couple pages on my other screen here that really go through all the nitty-gritty details of the different processes that are required to basically build that application for them. So what we're going to do is I'm going to actually walk through this process here and show you kind of what that would look like. Instead of me pulling up an Excel spreadsheet and starting to hammer things out, let's feed it to ChatGPT and see, based on the prompts I'm giving it, how it returns and what kind of data we get back. So I'm going to call this our loan origination system. I should have picked an easier word to spell. And what I've got is I've got some background here that I'm going to copy from my other screen, but this really goes through all the details of the project, right? They have a manual system of originating loans. They're looking to automate it. It follows certain processes, your standard loan origination process, right? Pre-qualification, application, processing, underwriting, et cetera. And then we've given the language model some information about what each of those pieces entail, right? An application. As a customer, I need to be able to fill out an app. As a bank employee, I need to be able to view that app and approve it. I need to be able to move it through the next process. Documents that we need to gather. It's basically that big brain dump that we've done with the client. I've now fed into our model here. This part at the bottom, what this allows us to do is, as we're building out different applications within the system, we have to be very cognizant of what data are we storing, what data are we working with. If we have integrations, how does that data flow back and forth? This gives us a kind of a nice way to be able to start to build that out. It's not automated yet, but it's coming. It can get kind of close. You can say, I need a data type that's a customer, and it has basic fields you would see in a financial institution, and it'll spit out something pretty close, right? First name, last name, address, address line 2, city, state, zip, etc. But we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. So for now, I'm going to just skip that part. But when I hit start, blank screen, right? We have no requirements. We have the name of the project, we have the background, and now is when we start to get to build out the actual requirements of the application. So from here, what I'm doing is I'm feeding it the features from my requirements document. So feature 1, for example, is pre-qualification. That's the first step in the process. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that over here. We'll paste it in. And this basically goes through a process of bank employees gathering customer information. The system needs to be able to run business rules against the data to see if they qualify and what the estimated loan terms are. And users of this would be, customers and bank employees. So when I hit generate now, we're going to call using our ChatGPT module. I'm going to call OpenAI, and I'm going to feed it this information with the prompt I've given it, which provides the background of the project, the name of it, the users, and finally this requirement. And it's going to, you'll see here in a second, it's going to spit back the details that it thinks, based on what we fed it, we need to complete that requirement. Now, as it's spinning, of course, it's going through and calculating all that out, bringing all that data back and putting it in a form here that we can view. But we can see, based on what I fed it, it said, okay, the requirement is we need to gather customer information, run business rules to determine qualification and estimated terms. It's come up with some acceptance criteria for that high-level requirement, right? We need to allow bank employees to input data. We should be able to validate and store it. We should be able to run business rules, and we should calculate and display estimated loan terms. I didn't feed it all that. I fed it some of that. But I didn't feed it anything about displaying, data to the user. I didn't put anything in there about validating or storing it. It came up with this. It has sussed that out based on the requirement that I fed it. This is the power of using generative AI for this. It's going to think of things that maybe we hadn't yet. So some of that, to Gordon's point, where you end up with a project at the end that everyone goes, oh, this isn't what I wanted. We need to add 14 more features to it. We forgot about this piece. Oh, this form needs to be blue. Like it's going to help you suss a lot of that out early on in the process. Now, to complete this requirement, it's actually also come up with some user stories, right? So as a customer, remember, we had different users we sent in there. I want to be able to provide my income, assets, liabilities, and credit history. We need to be able to put that in, and here's the acceptance criteria for it. As a bank employee, I want to run business rules to determine the loan qualification. Well, what's the acceptance criteria? Well, it should have business rules in it. It should apply them, and it should, display the estimated loan terms. All of that would have taken me a half hour, 45 minutes to type all of that out, and I still probably would have got half of it wrong and had to go back and look at it. This gets me started. The other thing you can do is you can actually add to it. If you want to add more stories, you can put some more detail in there and go. You can also regenerate it. Sometimes ChatGPT goes on its own. It goes out into la la land. It comes back with some data that may not be necessarily factually accurate. And if you see some of them there, you can hit this, and this is where you can send the data back through and say, okay, try again. Based on this response, give me your next version of that. So once I add that to the RTM, it's just that simple. From here, it's really plugging and playing and dropping the next, version, the next requirement in, and letting it generate. So in this case, this is pre-qualification stage. So, this is the application phase, right? So if they pre-qualified, the next step would be application. So here, the users for that would also be your customers and your bank employees. Now, I'm not a financial services institution employee, so I'm probably gonna get some of the terms wrong, but stick with me here. When I hit generate, now it's taking, okay, we've got the background, we've got the scope, we've got the requirements we've already done. Let's feed that in plus this next one. So based on the feedback I've already gotten and this new requirement, what do I need to do next? And this is where you can really start to see the power. So we've got a little bit more here than we did in the first one, right? Pre-qualification, simple. We're filling out a form, we're entering some data. Do you make enough money? Do you have a job? Do you have a good credit score? Cool. We're going to move to application. This is a little bit more in depth. So in this case, we're saying that we should allow customers to submit applications. Bank employees should be able to review and process these. You can see it found some more details again, right? Like name, address, income, employment history, etc. Putting in pay stubs, W-2 forms, tax returns. It should allow the lender to order a credit report. That isn't anywhere in what I've put in. Like it just knows this by understanding that when we're talking about a financial process, when we're talking about a loan, when we're talking about an application, that's a typical thing you would get. That's how that generative AI works. And then again, we get our user stories, submit the application, supporting documents. We have to review and process it. So yeah, as you go through all this, you can see we could keep going through this, and it would show the same data over and over here, and show the next parts of the process. I'll save us a little bit of time here, and show you one that's already complete. So go ahead and hit close. One I did earlier with the same data here. And if I pull it up, this is the actual output it's giving me, right? So when I hit download RTM, it's providing me with this Excel document that's going to go through in the detail I needed as a development team, something I can hand to our developer team to actually build the application that you're looking for. So you can see we have the same things in here, right? Like the pre-qualification process, the acceptance criteria for it. We have, requirement 3 is the automated application, the ability to submit applications, the ability to securely store them and manage the documentation. And you can see it keeps going. I think there's about eight different requirements here, all the way down to even I put in a really, really tiny blurb about loan servicing, and it did its best job it could on that. But if we were able to fall this over now, if you remember the decomposition of the requirement, the next step down would be your product backlog item, your user story. So if I were to take, requirement 2 here, go into my product backlog item, I could see that I have 3 in this case. It found 3 in this case, product backlog items that are needed to support that requirement, along with what the definition of done is. So again, gathering customer information, running business rules against it, providing estimated loan terms and interest rates. But it's written them because of the prompt I've given it. It's written it in a user story format. So if you're doing agile development work, this is right up your alley. This is what you're used to seeing as a developer. Here's my user story. Here's my acceptance criteria. The next thing you could do off this is test cases. How do I verify this is done? It's just adding to the prompt and saying, hey, while you did this, also give me test cases. And it'll look at this and go, okay, here's what you need to do to verify that this actually works based on what you've given me. So from here, we've gotten, probably there's about 27 different user stories involved with this, that this model and this application have done. This typically takes one of the architects on my team 2-3 days to do something of this level of detail. It's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of document searching. You're looking at models, you're talking to people, you're gathering requirements, you're iterating on it. This just saved me 2 days. So as you can imagine, go ahead, please.
Tim, I was just going to jump in and say, the application that Tim has shown you was maybe a couple weeks work in total, right? And in this example, we do this all the time, right? If it's a use case where you're doing something once, yeah, it's fine to copy and paste into ChatGPT. But once you get to the point where it's part of your process, you want to do it all the time. There's a lot of different prompts involved in this that took a while to get right. We've now incorporated those into decisions to control the whole process. So now we've created a process that's standardized, built-in decisions, making the calls back and forth to OpenAI. And I had a couple questions in here. They asked if we can use this with other systems like SAP Oracle, as well as other financial systems. And I mean, what we're doing here, this process that we're showing you is requirements. I mean, if those requirements were related to Oracle or SAP, no problem, right? So we've last year we did over 100 projects, and so we run through this a lot. Like I said, Tim's got a team of 10, 12 folks that really do nothing but focus on gathering the requirements. So for us, building out a tool was a no-brainer because we do this every week.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was another question that came in that was really good too. Do we have assumptions, dependencies between stories and risk generated as side artifacts? And that's a good point. This can continue to be expanded upon. This is version 1. We wanted to take what's the smallest amount of time I can spend to get the biggest amount of return on my investment. And that was really starting with requirements, user stories, acceptance criteria, things that take a very long amount of time to actually, develop and come up with. This saved us a ton of time. But you're absolutely right. I could take a prompt and say, okay, looking at these user stories and looking at these requirements, I need the dependencies between them and what order they need to go in. It'll do a job. It may not do it perfectly, but it'll at least get you somewhere. It'll get you started. Assumptions, that one's a little more difficult because it doesn't know what it doesn't know, right? So inferring, well, because you said maybe you said SAP, now I'm inferring I need to know whether it's S4 HANA or the other one. I don't know that it's going to go into that level of detail, but you're absolutely right. Those are great ways to keep extending it.
Now, we did get a question, can we integrate this tool with SAP, Oracle, ServiceNow? Absolutely. We have tons of clients who do integrate with SAP, with Oracle, also with ServiceNow. And you might integrate a tool like this into Jira, where you're building out, the tasks, tracking them within Jira.
Yeah, absolutely. And does this work in the higher ed space? Yes, absolutely. That's actually 20 years of my background is in higher ed. And we've been talking with clients about ways to extend some of the functionality of student-facing systems with this as well. So you could think of things like maybe if you had, for example, students that had questions, common questions hitting the admissions site. You could have maybe build a call and response type of bot that had all the knowledge in it of the common questions that a student could hit off of, and it could find the best match and return it. Just one example of many out there.
Well, Tim,
Yeah.
how about would it make sense to dive under the hood, show how all this was put together?
Yeah, absolutely. So, behind the scenes here, we were looking at this dashboard, right? So this is kind of the easy way to view what we have going on here. But within the back end, if we pop under my designer elements folder here, we'll see all of the entities that were created to support this project, all the forms, all the flows, the rules, the integrations, etc. And popping through these, we can see it starts off as a pretty basic system here where you've got, a simple form. Once the data is put in, we do a lot of subflows here, right? We do a lot of modular development because if I can build this once and it does the thing I need in kind of a self-contained flow, I can reuse it. So I can save time later by, modularizing my development here. So if we pop in, we can see it's mapping some data. It's storing the information I've got. It's asking me, did I say yes or no on my data types? But where it really gets interesting isn't most of this. It's really under here, where when we're looking at the RTM itself, the full RTM details. This is what the form that you saw where we were putting in. We had the name of the project at the top. We had the product or project background.
Well, drill in there, Tim. Let's take a
Yeah,
look at it.
there we go. Yeah, we had our, again, our forms designer, drag and drop, easy to build in. You've got our project name, our background, and then we've got this repeater here of the requirements. Because of course there can be many, right? There could be one requirement, there could be 10, there could be 100, and this is allowing you to do that. When you're generating a new requirement, if we pop back to our flow here, you'll see that's actually an output from the form is generate a new requirement. So once we've hit that, what's going to happen is it's going to dive in here and say, okay, Here, a whole bunch of stuff going on, right? What details do you have about the requirement? Here's that form we looked at earlier. And in fact, this is one of our simple forms that are very simple to drag and drop and use on here. But it simply asks, what's the feature you're designing? Who are the users? Of course, all this data, these labels are things that you can edit with ease and change if you needed to. If you wanted this to be a form that was required, you could even show an asterisk on it, so it'll even prompt them that they know that's something they need to enter in before hitting the button. But as here, we have a cancel, we have a generate, and if we look at the generate path here, we'll see that that kind of comes down along here and starts going through. I see here. We starts going through our Chat GPT logic. And this is kind of where the magic happens, right? It takes all that data, those requirement details, the users, and the RTM itself, right? That background, that project name, and everything it already knows about, and calls Chat GPT with one simple step. So just like that, we're able to pass in a message here. And this is where our prompt is, right? This is where we write out, hey, Chat GPT, based on this project name, based on this project backlog, give me the user stories, give me the requirements out of it, give me the acceptance criteria for them, and give it to me in a format that I can use in a program. I don't want necessarily just a paragraph of text like you get out of ChatGPT where you got to copy and paste it. I want to see the JSON. I want you to return it in a format that I can then use and use within the platform and use within the orchestration system, use within rules. This is
But
that's it.
yeah, I was going to say, pop that up again there, Tim. So here's the example of where, you know, it's telling you this is the prompt that we're sending, right? And there's some variables in there that are those highlighted boxes where it's pulling the variables from the flow. So this is how you take a prompt that you would send, and instead of having some sheet somewhere where you're copying and paste them, it's now within decisions, part of the process. And you can use data on the fly to send along with the prompt to get the right format. These things take a little while. It's a trial and error to get it the right prompt to work the way you want it. But once you've got it working, it's saved right in the process, and you can automate it.
And then what's great is when you work with it enough that you say, return the response in JSON in the following format, and we give it the format. What's great is this works just like when you're building a report with ChatGPT or building a letter. If you give it a prompt and say, I need you to follow this specific format, requirements, acceptance criteria, user stories, it'll actually follow those headings, and it can do it within again this machine readable format that then I can parse and pass through the system and then return on my forms. So it makes it real simple instead of having to, again, put this in here in this prompt and then copy and paste it out and build it yourself. Because you can tell Chat GPT to return it in a way that the machine can read it, it's easy from there. So once it passes it out, it'll look and say, for each user story returned, we're going to build them, we're going to generate requirements, we're going to store them. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. Again, the generated requirement form is what we saw earlier. This is just getting the data passed into it from that Chat GPT step, from its response. And all these fields are being filled out by that data because we're able to get it to return the right way. That's the magic sauce right there. That's the hardest part of this.
Tim, we had another question about, how we've integrated with SAP, and we have one partner that has built an entire master data management module that does nothing but run rules, show forms to users, and allows you to build an item master, vendor master, material master within SAP with decisions kind of managing the workflow, getting it to the right people to do that. So there's one example of how partners, customers are using decisions to build out a process that integrates with SAP.
Yeah, absolutely. But really, that's the meat of it right there. From there, it's just downloading it, which creates the Excel file and spits it back out. But again, couple weeks worth of work, saves us hours and days every time we run through this process. And to Gordon's point, it's hundreds of projects a year.
Yeah, we did have a request to see if we could package this up as part of decisions. And to answer that question, we will be putting this in our app store. So we're going to send it to our solutions team to put in the error checking validation, kind of harden it up slightly, and then so you will find this in the app store in the weeks to come, and we'll announce that when it's up there. We did get a question about how is decisions different from RPA tool with BPM, and that's a great question. So decisions is not an RPA tool, so we do not do the screen path of data entry into a green screen, for example. But what I'd say is we're a business process management tool that does everything else. And in fact, we're often used to orchestrate RPA bots as part of a larger process. We have one client that files tax credits amongst the various states. They use the RPA bots to do data entry on state level web pages, and every website in every state is different. But decisions is orchestrating the overall process and then calling on the bot to do the data entry or to grab the return from the website on these various states. So we have a number of clients that utilize decisions to orchestrate RPA bots. Again, I think you get the general idea here in that, what you saw is that we're using ChatGPT as part of the process to help generate these user stories, the test criteria, but also we're putting it in the context of an automated process with forms, with dashboards, with UI, with data that gets saved such that you can create, an automated process. And whether back in your own organizations, maybe you're not doing this particular process regularly, but something else that could benefit from some automation with ChatGPT. But hopefully this gives you a few ideas as to how you could utilize our platform to create automation where none exists today. Okay, we did get a question about, so is ChatGPT module and RTM, are they different platforms? So ChatGPT, yes, ChatGPT is something different. Our module is contained within decisions. So we enable the automated calls to ChatGPT using the decisions platform and our module. All right, again, we have part 1 coming up next month. And in part 1 of this series, or part 2 rather, for part 2, we're going to show the requirements gathering, like everything leading up to creating the document and how you can utilize decisions along with ChatGPT to automate a lot of that repetitive manual work in terms of generating the document itself. So that's coming up in December, and you can sign up on our website at any point. So with that, I think we'll call it a wrap. Again, if you'd like to learn more about decisions, please hit us up on our website, decisions.com. I'd highly recommend signing up to talk to one of our engineers to help walk you through the platform. So, and hope to see you on our next webinar.